Hello, people of YouTube. Who's on first? I am WaspStar986, and welcome back to Random Nation Studios. And welcome to the big finale to my FNAF Security Breach Foxy Theory video series. Before we get into it, I just wanted to thank you all so much for your patience and for your support. All three of my previous theory videos have well since passed reaching 100 views, and you have no idea how much that means to me. Also, just so y'all know, the second 8-week period starts on October 10th, meaning, well, as of me recording, tomorrow, meaning that I had just one weekend before the brain grinding started up again, so I knew I had to hurry and get this video up while I could, and that's exactly what I did. Again, thank you for your patience. Y'all are awesome. Now let's move on to the real reason you clicked on this video. Let's talk FNAF. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of my final theory, I'd like to quickly discuss another theory presented by fellow YouTuber RyeToast. A theory that, if true, basically debunks even the chance that my theory is true. But I feel I'd be doing the community and my viewers a disservice if I didn't at least mention this theory, because I think that he may be onto something. I'm not going to go over everything he said, for obvious reasons. If you'd like to go and hear his theory for yourself, a link will be provided in the description, as well as in the end card. However, the key point of RyeToast's theory regarding Foxy is that the reason Foxy isn't at the Pizzaplex is because he was never at the Pizzaplex. Now, it may seem strange. I mean, if this is the case, why is there so much Foxy-themed, merchandise and stuff? Well, Rye explains that the reason behind this is that Fazbear fully intended to introduce a Foxy robot to the establishment, but they didn't want to be too hasty about it. All the Foxy merch, the posters, the snacks, and even Kids Cove itself was intended to, get the patrons used to the idea of Foxy being there and to see how well customers would respond to the new character's presence. Given the sheer amount of Foxy stuff and, again, Kids Cove's existence, it's very possible Fazbear Entertainment was very close to introducing some iteration of Foxy the Pirate to the Pizzaplex, but just hadn't gotten the chance to do so yet. Now, do I think that RyeToast's theory is correct? Well, kind of, since it does make a lot of sense from a business perspective. And while I acknowledge there's a chance that this theory is correct, you have to remember what company we're talking about here. I mean, maybe this is one of the very few instances of Fazbear Entertainment making a sound and well-coordinated business/investment decision, but as I've already discussed in my previous videos, Fazbear Entertainment, for the most part, is insanely inconsistent and just flat out dumb with its money. I mean, do I even have to bring up DJ Music Man again? However, just because the company's history is full of stupid choices, especially when it comes to its investments, doesn't mean that they can't get things right every now and then. That said, as I will discuss later, I think that there's another explanation for Foxy's absence that is just as probable. Anyway, with all that said, let's get back to the matter at hand, my actual theory. So, real quick, let's just take a quick look at what we've covered to make sure everyone's up to speed, refresh y'all's memory, and all that jazz. So, for those of you who have been paying attention, there are a few key points that I believe provide support to my theory. My theory is that there was indeed a Foxy animatronic at the Pizzaplex prior to the events of Security Breach, but by some cruel twist of fate was decommissioned and ultimately was transformed into Roxanne Wolf. Now, a lot of you may find that absolutely nuts, and I don't blame you, but given this is Fazbear Entertainment, the possibility exists. And it's actually Fazbear Entertainment which is the first major key point to my theory. Like I've said ad nauseum, this company is crazy stupid with how it handles its money. And Foxy is easily one of the greatest examples of just how poorly Fazbear treats its assets. Remember poor Toy Foxy, better known now as Mangle? They could have easily solved the problem of the robot getting torn apart every day by the toddlers if they had just put up a fence or something, but instead they decided to just say screw it and abandon the robot that they spent a, quote, small fortune on to become a living pile of glorified Tinker Toys. And even in the very first FNAF game, you can see that Captain Foxy is badly busted up and out of order, despite the fact that he probably didn't need any major or costly repairs to be brought back to full functionality. If FNAF VR is anything to go by, the dude literally just blew a fuse. That's all that would have needed replacing to get him up and running again. Now, to be fair, it's possible that the fuses that he ran on at that time had been discontinued, meaning it would have been impossible for Foxy to be repaired even if Fazbear Entertainment wanted to. Which then in turn makes me wonder why they didn't just replace the robot outright if they wanted to continue using the IP. Why keep a non-functional robot at that establishment if all he was doing was just taking up space? I mean, obviously it doesn't really matter much now, but I think you guys know what I mean. The long and the short of it is that no matter how you slice it, Fazbear Entertainment is terrible with how they handle their money, their investments, and their assets. With that in mind, we also have to remember that the company apparently has zero issue with just outright scrapping important IPs. I mean, Glamrock Bonnie got destroyed, or at least it's certainly implied that he was destroyed, and promptly abandoned in favor of replacing him outright with Montgomery Gator. And it seems like not even poor Freddy is immune to such a fate, as Vanessa basically says that if she discovers that he's helping Gregory, he'd be scrapped, Monty would stand in as the band's lead until a new Freddy bot can be built. And if Freddy Fazbear can be just completely junked and then replaced with a whole new Freddy bot, why didn't they ever rebuild Bonnie? I mean, maybe there were plans to rebuild Bonnie, but they were obviously abandoned. I say that because it's clearly been quite some time since Bonnie was decommissioned and Monty took over his place as the band's bassist. And that leads to my next point. It would seem that Fazbear Entertainment views their IPs as completely disposable. I mean, this is obvious, considering, again, Freddy himself is viewed as expendable. Now, there's a chance that Vanessa simply said this to frighten Freddy, but I doubt it. I mean, this would be one heck of an empty threat to make. And truthfully, it's not like they don't have the means to replace Freddy outright if they absolutely had to. They've got a literal army of endoskeletons roaming around the underground tunnels. They've probably also got things like spare casings, replacements for the parts unique to each character, and probably at least one backup of all the characters' AIs stored away somewhere safe just in case they had to perform a major repair or even totally rebuild one of the animatronics. And if that is true, again, the fact that Bonnie was just left abandoned is extremely sus. But for a character as important as Freddy, the literal face of the organization, they'd have to have the means to rebuild him from scratch completely if the need arose. And this is where we finally start to enter Theoryland. Buckle up, friends, because this is where we start to touch on the overarching narrative for my theory of what I think happened to our favorite pirate Fox. In one of my earlier videos, I stated that it was possible that Roxanne was built by using her casing and placing it over Foxy's old endoskeleton. The main reason I believe this is because Captain Foxy has very similar proportions to the female animatronics, that his endoskeleton was probably similar enough to be used rather than a brand new female endoskeleton. Again, remember, Fazbear will cut corners and cut costs however possible. What's more, I referenced the possible foreshadowing for this very idea as seen in the Freddy and Friends On Tour cartoons. The fact that Foxy's face gets ripped off and one of Roxanne's cut voice lines is her lamenting her damaged face after her decommission Seems like there was some sort of deep connection between the old Foxy in the cartoon and Roxanne Wolf. I admittedly was never married to this idea, and now after thinking about it, I'm no longer convinced that that is the case. Maybe it is, and it would be cool, but short of confirmation from Steel Wool and Scott Cawthon themselves, I remain skeptical. However, that doesn't mean there isn't still a deep connection between the two characters. After all, there were other instances of possible foreshadowing, namely the fact that there are several moments both in the promotional cartoons and the introduction sequence of Security Breach where emphasis is placed on the character's right hand. Or, I guess in Foxy's case, a lack of a right hand. Remember, I said the fact that the way the camera focuses on Roxy's right hand as she flares her clawed fingers is almost like she's showing it off. She wants us, the audience, to see it. But that's all minutia at this point. The real connection between these two characters goes so much deeper than what to an animatronic is essentially a shiny accessory. There are other, much more telling elements to Roxanne's character that are shockingly similar, if not identical, to Captain Foxy's. And if I'm right and Roxanne Wolf was at least partially constructed using a decommissioned Foxy, then these elements point to a very dark backstory. The first of these noteworthy elements actually traces all the way back to my very first theory video and the very first two theory hints that I gave. The first has to do with the fact that Roxanne Wolf's eye color is the exact same color as Foxy and all his canon variants. Now, for some of you, this seems insignificant, but for those of you who have followed the FNAF franchise for a while, you know that even details this small can, and often do have at least some degree of importance to the lore and are useful in deciphering the lore. If nothing else, the fact that Roxy's eyes are the exact same color as every canon version of Foxy means that she has to be part of the Foxy family lineup. But it's the second hint that I gave that really drives home why this detail is important. The second theory hint was, what special ability does Roxanne Wolf share with the original Foxy? Withered Foxy, the old rundown version of Captain Foxy seen in FNAF 2. The reason that I called Withered Foxy the original is because in FNAF 2, the withered animatronics are referred to as the original four, meaning that these were very likely the very first versions of the core four animatronics ever constructed. In FNAF 2, there was a gameplay mechanic where you would use a Freddy mask to disguise yourself and fool the animatronics to, well, avoid death. This trick worked on everyone except for the marionette and Withered Foxy. And just like Withered Foxy, it seems Roxanne has a special vision that allows her to see things that none of the others can. Now, of course, I'm not saying that the eyes Roxy has in Security Breach came from Withered Foxy. I mean, I doubt that they'd still be in existence at this point in time. And even if they were, I doubt they'd still be functional, or at the very, very least, they probably wouldn't be compatible with the technology used in the Glamrocks. But since Fazbear Entertainment apparently has more money than God, they could very easily replicate such a technology and use it for the Glamrocks. In fact, it's possible that all the Glamrock animatronics have enhanced vision to some degree. Remember in the beginning of Security Breach, Freddy only starts to glitch out after scanning the crowd and spotting a specific child, presumably Gregory. But it's Roxanne Wolf whose eyes are truly enhanced to the level of beyond superhuman. And after we upgrade Freddy with her eyes, we get to see just how special Roxanne's vision is firsthand. However, the fact that Roxanne has X-ray eyes, which are stated as being meant to help her win races, seems strange. I mean, it would be extremely useful if it gave the robot an edge, if part of its job was to keep an eye out for danger when dealing with a large group of people. As such, this could be useful to have on a racetrack if it allowed you to see far ahead of the cars in front of you, so that you can plan and maneuver as you're driving to avoid hitting the other racers. But you know what else such a feature like that would be quite useful for? Treasure hunts. Okay. But it would also be helpful if you're in charge of watching over a large group of children, say in a crowded daycare. Anyway, there are also a number of personality and behavioral traits that Roxanne Wolf and Captain Foxy share that are not just telling, but creepy. In FNAF AR, much like Roxanne Wolf, Foxy's personality seems very cocky and even kind of smug. He's confident, and he takes pleasure in the player's misery as he hunts you down. There are even a few voice lines that AR Foxy and Roxanne Wolf say that, at least to me, seem very similar in nature. Most of them are intended to intimidate the player and convey a sense of egotism and cruelty. Now, I'm just going to put this out there. I do not believe that this is a perfect reflection of how Roxanne usually behaves. Sure, she may be a bit gruff and highly competitive. She's clearly very competitive. But she is a wolf. Just like Montgomery Gator, it isn't unusual for a character based on a creature like a wolf to have a bit of a rough and tumble personality. But considering these animatronics are intended to entertain and interact with families and young children, I highly doubt that they were ever meant to be this savage. A good portion of the behaviors of the band members are likely a result of Afton's corrupting influence. Heck, that could be true for FNAF AR's Foxy as well. And if that's true, it only strengthens my idea that Roxanne's AI and personality programming is just a modified version of Foxy's. Moreover, Foxy's own AI and personality were likely created by pulling data from the FNAF VR and possibly also the AR games. The idea for this is actually courtesy of another Rytos Theory video, wherein he states that Glamrock Freddy's AI was probably programmed using data pulled from these games. If this is indeed how Fazbear built Freddy's AI and personality, why not do the same for Foxy and all the others? It's very possible that this cruel and callous attitude and behavior is the result of Glitchtrap's virus interacting with the animatronics programming. And the fact that it has an almost identical effect on Roxanne as it does Foxy seems to indicate that the two robots' programming must be extremely similar, if not identical. Another fascinating parallel between Roxanne Wolf and Foxy, specifically Withered Foxy, is seen in their jump scares. I mentioned this back in part 2.5, and shout out again to A Honey for bringing this to my attention. In FNAF 2, Withered Foxy's jump scare involves leaping to the security desk to attack the player, and in Security Breach, Roxanne chases you until she gets close enough that you're just out of reach before taking a big leap forward. And if she's successful in grabbing you, it initiates her jump scare. Now granted, these are not identical, but they are definitely similar enough to make you think. Especially when you see this. Before I move on, there are a few details I'd like to go over just in case you still aren't convinced that there's a chance my theory holds water. If you recall back in part 2, I mentioned how Roxanne seems to be doing everything in her power to prevent Roxy Raceway from getting repaired so that it can be open to the public again. Whether she realizes this or not isn't clear, but it certainly seems like she's actively keeping the racetrack closed. And as I said, this would seem like the exact opposite of what she'd want, given how much she enjoys racing and her competitive spirit. So then why is she doing this? Why is she keeping the raceway from being repaired? Well, it actually all traces back to Foxy and himself, and I'll explain why in just a moment. While the glam rock animatronics are primarily a source of entertainment, they also seem to have built into them some sort of security protocols. They can and do act as security when necessary. I mean, why else would Vanessa, the nighttime security guard, rally the other glam rocks to help her to find Gregory? Especially since there are so many security staff bots around that she could employ to help her instead. Well, I guess it would make sense that if the robots have protocols in their programming that forbids them from ever harming a guest, that they would also have built-in protocols that would tell them to protect guests as well. And this is what makes me think that Roxanne may actually be intentionally sabotaging her own attraction to keep it out of order. If keeping guests safe is part of the Glamrock's programming, it would make sense for Roxy to try and do everything she can to keep guests at her dedicated areas safe from harm. I'm guessing that at some point she may have seen the sinkhole under the raceway after receiving her optical upgrade. What's more, she may have some idea as to what is really underneath the racetrack, and seeing as how management at the Pizzaplex and really Fazbear Entertainment itself are the very embodiment of insanity, her only option is to keep the racetrack from ever getting finished. As much as it must pain her to do so, her programming makes it so she'd rather not race than see someone get hurt or even killed. And I know what you're thinking. If Roxy knows about the evil under the raceway, why doesn't she tell security or anybody what she has seen? Well, I'll tell you why, and it will blow your mind. So, based on everything that I've come to understand about the Pizzaplex, both prior to and during the events of Security Breach, I firmly believe that Roxanne Wolf was one of, if not the very last robot to get introduced to the mall. At one point, there had to be no less than 5 major animatronic characters: Freddy Fazbear, Glamrock Bonnie, Glamrock Chica, Montgomery Gator, and of course Captain Foxy. Now, given the character's history, it's highly likely that Foxy was a side character. He was not part of the main band, but instead hosted his own separate attraction. And my guess is that this attraction, his sole attraction, was naturally Kids Cove. Now, this is where a bit of speculation gets sprinkled into the mix. In the past, Kids Cove was, well, essentially, it was kind of like a daycare. In FNAF 2, the Kids Cove area was headed by Toy Foxy, where it tended to the very young children that would visit the pizzeria. As such, at the Pizzaplex, it's not too hard to imagine Kids Cove also being a sort of daycare. I believe at one point the daycare wasn't run by Sun and Moon, but was run by Foxy. Now, remember how I mentioned how having an ability like Roxy's X-ray eyes and enhanced vision would be very useful for monitoring a crowded daycare? It's very possible Foxy had a very similar mod to Roxanne's eyes for this very purpose. Just think about it. If Foxy was originally in charge of the daycare, he would have a very easy time monitoring the large daycare as well as the theater from atop the balcony overlooking the whole room. X-ray eyes would also enable him to see through the walls and check for any trouble inside the theater and surrounding areas, which he could then access by running down the hallway leading from the hidden room behind the balcony straight into the theater. For some reason, this got changed. Foxy got a new area in the current Kids Cove across from Monty's Gator Golf, while the daycare got a re-theme and the Sun and Moon animatronic was introduced and took over as the attendant. Now, I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but the fact that there are quite a few elements in the daycare that seem like they belong in Kids Cove makes me think that the daycare may originally have been Kids Cove. One of the big things that I've neglected to mention in previous videos is the fact that the secret room that I mentioned a second ago, which we're all pretty sure at this point is basically the daycare attendant's private quarters, can only be accessed by unlocking the hidden door behind the Captain Foxy's Pirate Adventure movie poster. This is admittedly a bit iffy as far as evidence goes, but it is interesting that the daycare attendant's private room would be hidden behind a movie poster so heavily based on the Captain Foxy IP. Not to mention the fact that the theater itself has some aesthetic elements that seem a bit more relevant to Foxy's pirate theme than the Sun and Moon characters' more jester-like theming, including the theater sign, which seems to resemble a roll of parchment. Now, granted, parchment was used during the time when jesters were big, but one of the many uses for it was map making. You know, like treasure maps. Another detail that makes me think that Kids Cove and the daycare were once one and the same is that if you look carefully at the Kids Cove posters in the elevators, you'll see illustrations of the play structures that are supposed to be in the current daycare. This makes me think that these posters were from back when Kids Cove was the daycare before they made the big change. They just never bothered to make a new poster for the new Kids Cove and daycare once they became separate areas because, well, Fazbear Entertainment is cheap as sin. And honestly, this is one of the few times I can somewhat understand the decision. However, it would have been much smarter for them to make a new poster for the daycare now that it was under new management and had been given an overhaul. I mean, just imagine the shock of all those kids whose parents dropped them off at the daycare area, expecting to see their favorite Fox, only for them to meet this guy. Yeah, seriously, is it any wonder why these kids started having night terrors? Now, remember where the current Kids Cove is located? Yeah, it's literally right next door to Monty's Gator Golf. Now, why would this be important? Well, remember, Monty's Gator Golf is where we've been led to believe that Bonnie went to get destroyed. Now, if Foxy was at the Pizzaplex and was ruling over Kids Cove around the time of Bonnie's demise, it's very possible that Foxy may have been there when it happened. Now, I am not saying that Foxy is the one who did Bonnie in. I believe that it was either Monty, who was almost certainly under Vanny or Glitchtrap's influence at the time, or Vanny herself. I mean, heck, Vanny could have easily destroyed Bonnie using the staff pods, just like she did with Freddy in that one cutscene where she tells them to disassemble Freddy. However, if Foxy was there, as in he was just in the general vicinity of Monty Golf the night of Bonnie's destruction, then it's very possible that he saw something. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have. Clearly, I have absolutely no evidence to back this up, and I accept that. But I've got to give some kind of explanation as to why Foxy would have been decommissioned in the first place. Now, I don't know who or what would have been responsible or even how his decommissioning would have gone down, but it happened. My best guess is that something happened during the day in Kids Cove. Not exactly hard to see history repeating itself there. Or perhaps Foxy had an accident and had to be stashed away until he could be fixed. But here's the catch. Foxy never got repaired, he got repurposed. All of it in a bid to silence the old Fox under the guise of getting rid of an old IP that maybe wasn't earning as much as he used to. Again, history repeating itself. It also provided them with the opportunity to introduce a new Fazbear IP, one that maybe they'd been wanting to add to the Pizzaplex's lineup for a while. What's more, they had a way to cut costs and streamline construction using the salvaged components from the decommissioned Foxy robot. This was most likely a big bonus to the company since I'm assuming it probably occurred shortly after spending God only knows how much money on DJ Music Man. So any excuse to cut corners and spend less money would have been a welcome one. And now with Bonnie and Foxy permanently out of order, they had the perfect excuse to introduce fans to Roxanne Wolf. However, along with his AI and personality, Roxanne may have also inherited some of Foxy's old memories. Now, I'm not a robotics expert in any sense of the word, so I'm not certain if AI, personality programs, and memory would all be on separate drive, but as I noted in part 2, some of Roxanne's lines seem to hint at a very traumatic past. Lines like, "Everybody still loves me, right? And I just need a little work done," might seem like the bemoaning of a vain, broken diva. But remember, we only hear Roxanne say these lines after she's been decommissioned. And if I'm correct, there is a much deeper and sadder meaning behind these lines. Roxanne could have at least vague memories of her past existence and knows all too well what could happen to her now that she has just been absolutely wrecked. Moreover, it's these old memories that explain why Roxanne has chosen to act like a savage rogue rather than say anything about the monster in the basement beneath Roxy's raceway. Again, it's possible that Foxy saw something the night Bonnie was destroyed. Not only did Bonnie get scrapped, but the knowledge of how he was, disposed of may have gotten Foxy into hot water. There are a few theories going around as to who did Bonnie in and why. One of the more popular theories seems to be that he was lured to Monty Gator Gulf so that he could be destroyed and his body salvaged to help rebuild William Afton's body. While I do have some reservations about this theory, it's honestly the only thing that makes any sense given what little information that I have at this point. And if that is true, then it would make sense that any witnesses would be seen as a loose end that would need to be dealt with. And sadly, I can only assume that Foxy had simply seen too much to be allowed to live. So Foxy wound up scrapped as well, and his body salvaged to construct Fazbear Entertainment's newest character and his own successor, Roxanne Wolf. Unfortunately, while Foxy may have gone through many changes, physically and mentally, he also retained much of his original identity. And it's likely that he hasn't truly forgotten everything. And sadly, it seems that Fazbear Entertainment won't let him forget anytime soon. Everything from placing Roxanne's room right next to Monty's, to having the remnants of his old pirate ride right outside the window of her green room, serves to remind her of who she is, who she was, and to keep her on a very tight leash, literally and figuratively. And that, friends, is my official FNAF security breach Foxy theory in its entirety. It's insane, I know, and it'll probably be proven wrong once the Ruin DLC finally drops sometime later next year. But as nuts as it is, I love it. But what do you think? Do you think I'm right? Or do you at least think my theory has merit? Do you think I missed something? If so, let me know. What do you think really happened to Foxy? Or do you subscribe to the idea that Foxy was never here to begin with? I want to know your thoughts, your theories, and how good or bad of a job you think I did making this theory. Just please be nice. This was truly a passion project for me. I'd been wanting to put this theory out there for a long while now, and I'm glad I finally did. I really hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing to help out my fledgling channel. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Seriously, let me know. Anyway, this is where I'm going to have to say farewell for now. Class starts again on Monday, which, as of me recording this, means tomorrow, so this will be the last you hear from me and my channel for a while. In the meantime, I am WaspStar986 with Random Nation Studios. Hope y'all have a very happy Halloween, happy holidays, etc. And as always, remember to stay safe, stay awesome, and stay random. Peace!